Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us tonight. I know that there's a lot of people that's out having parties and fireworking and a whole lot of stuff going to be going on tonight because it's the 4th of July weekend, and I hope everyone has a very happy, great, and safe 4th of July weekend. Have fun, eat a lot, and enjoy listening to the show tonight. We want to thank everybody dropping in the chat room here, and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to be with us tonight. If you do have questions tonight, and I'm sure we're probably going to get quite a few, if you want to, you can private chat one to either Ceiling Cat or myself, Henry Foister. And we will get those answered for you. And if you're listening from somewhere else and you want to come over to the chat room, feel free to come to paraxradionetwork.com and click on the chat now button. You'll be in the chat room with all these wonderful people. You'll be able to interact with them and interact with us. And if you're listening from somewhere else, though, and you do have questions, but you don't want to come over to the chat room, you can still get a question answered by sending it to theparanormalview@gmail.com and just put attention question. We will get those answered for you. Great show lined up for tonight. Tonight we have with us Jeffrey Gould. Maybe. Jeffrey already dropped off, did he? We have Barbara Duncan.
He dropped off. Ah, there he is.
I was like, that was quick. You kicked off that fast.
Yeah, you sure did, for some reason or another.
Yeah.
We got lots of good stuff to talk about tonight, and I guess I understand we got some other information that's going to be coming out. Something you might want to participate in, so we will find out what all that stuff is in just a little bit.
Me? Oh, cool.
Yeah, everybody will. So with that, why don't we just get started unless Jeff or Barbara has something else before we introduce our guest.
It's foggy in parts of California and fire in other parts of California.
Nice and cool most of yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought you was fixing to say it was snowing.
Not yet.
Compared to some of the days we had last week, it felt like it might as well have been snowing yesterday.
Yeah, last week it was very cool here, too. Yesterday wasn't real bad because it rained some and it was overcast, so it wasn't too bad. Today it's been cloudy, but it hasn't rained any here. And it got fairly warm, so tomorrow's supposed to be stormy, I guess, and raining a lot. So we'll have to wait and see. But 4th of July is supposed to almost be a washout, I think. So
you mean it's going to rain on the 4th of July there?
It's supposed to be storming here.
Oh.
A possibility of it anyway, put it that way.
That would be cool if they're just able to keep the mortars dry and still fire them off in the rain. That might look really cool.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure they do that sometimes. I've seen it going on. So
I came across an interesting video. Apparently, some years ago, I think in San Diego, there was a technical malfunction, and at the very start of a fireworks evening, everything detonated at once, and it was like 45 or 90 seconds of just Death Star explosion level cacophony, and then it was like, that's it. We run out. We don't have anything more.
Well, Jeff, why don't you introduce our guest? let's just
Yes.
get this thing.
Absolutely. Well, our guest tonight is paranormal investigator Rebecca Brumble, who has had a lifelong fascination with the paranormal, and rightfully so, reading ghost stories, moving to a haunted house, and learning all she can on the subject. In college, Rebecca founded an investigative group called Pittsburgh Night, and after college and a move to Philadelphia, she renamed her group Spirit of Pennsylvania, covering eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and eastern Maryland. And 15 years since the first Pennsylvania case, they're still going strong. So she attended a public ghost hunt at Fort Mifflin in 2006 when her love for the place took root. And after 10 years, she was recently elected to its board of directors, as well as being named Volunteer of the Year. And when she's not at Fort Mifflin, which she considers her second home, Rebecca is hosting the Shadows Radio here at Para X, Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and through Blue Topaz at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, or playing with beautiful daughter Olivia. So welcome, Rebecca Brumble.
Yay.
As she forgot to turn her mic on.
You didn't tell me to turn it back on.
Yeah.
You
Pretty
said
much
make
when it's
sure
not-
I mute it.
Live radio.
Hi guys, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Doing good. I got to meet Rebecca when we was doing our Gettysburg trip this time. Her and Eric came down for, I don't know, about an hour and a half, something like that, 2 hours, and you guys got to be on the radio and talk a little bit right there from the hotel.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to actually get to come out and see everybody's faces for once.
Which was good. How long have you been working at Fort Mifflin?
Well, I first attended an event about 10 years ago. And right after that, I started volunteering. Like, there was a volunteer day the very next day, and I actually just stuck around and hung out, and I've been there ever since.
Now, I was there one time, and it was in 2009, and I believe it was June. I was there, Ideal Event Management with the Ghost Hunters, had an event there. So I come over with Para X with Dave and Tommy Jones. Ended up broadcasting from, was it the gift shop or right there in the compound?
Yeah.
We broadcast live from there, and it was the first time that we was on CBS radio. So fantastic place. I enjoyed it. And I know I was amazed at the amount of people that come out for the Ghost Hunters, because they had an event before the investigation that night, and people was lined up out the hotel for must have been a block and a half, standing in line just waiting to come in and get autographs. I thought it was really something else. Does Ideal Event still go there and host things?
Occasionally. We kind of try to stay away from those big events anymore, just because they do draw in a lot of people, but they also draw in a lot of drama. So we try and stick to smaller events, and we host a lot of our own ghost hunts now too. But I think they still do one event a year there.
Yeah, since they've not on TV, I think they've lost a lot of, I won't say following, because they're still pretty popular, but it's not publicized as much anymore, I don't think. So, but they still, if you go to Ideal's site, they still have offerings for other places that they're doing. They do have a lot of other people that they put into those things. So, yeah. But
Fort Mifflin does a lot of ghost tours still, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, our entire September the middle of September through the end of October is entirely ghost. We call it Halloween on Mud Island. And we do everything from ghost tours to ghost events to paranormal investigations. You name it, paranormal-wise, you can do it in October. We also do trick-or-treating with our ghosts for little kids, so you can come all dressed up and get candy from our resident spirits. So it's a lot of fun, and we definitely embrace the paranormal side of our history. And we also welcome any paranormal team that's interested can always rent the fort out for an evening. We have, fairly reasonable rates comparatively to some of the other sites around the world. It's $900 for 10 people for overnight and $45 up to midnight. Like, it's ridiculously cheap.
I know you guys doing a lot of stuff there with your own events. Why don't you give us a history of the fort?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot. Now I got this. Hold on. All right, so the fort was commissioned in 1771, actually by the British. When the Revolution broke out in the 1775-76, the British abandoned what was basically just mud hills at that point. The Americans came in, they hired the same guy that laid out Washington, D.C., and they said, build us a fort. And so he came in, he finished the fort. The fort was commissioned, like I said, in 1771. It was actually finished in 1776. It was, at that point, a brick wall with a lot of wooden structures on the inside. So it still was not the fort that you see today. During the Revolution, the British came up the Delaware River trying to get to the port of Philadelphia. And they had two obstacles. They had Fort Mercer on the New Jersey side, and they had Fort Mifflin on our side. Fort Mifflin held out. For 1,000 cannonballs an hour were getting lobbed from these British ships in the river. Mifflin was sending them back just as much. It actually at one point got so bad that they were telling the guys at garrison at the fort, they said, if you can run out and grab a British cannonball and come back so we can shoot it back at them, you get an extra grog of rum. And that worked because they were collecting cannonballs by the bucket load, trying to get them back out to the ships. They also sunk pikes out into the river to try and stop up the ships. Unfortunately for the fort, the back channel flooded because there was some heavy rains that came through. And two British ships were able to get around the back side of the fort and bombarded the back wall of the fort, which then finally took it down. Now, we do say that we are the fort that never surrendered, because when the last people left the fort and they jumped in a rowboat and they rowed across the river to Fort Mercer, they never took down the flag. So official surrender for a military installation, you have to take down your flag. And the men who protected Mifflin to the end did not take down their flag. So it's always been flying. It's been flying since 1776, and we still actually, we still fly that flag. So that was the Revolutionary War. And then during that time, Washington was actually able to get his troops to Valley Forge. So if it wasn't for Mifflin and all the 200 men garrisoned there, Washington never would have made it to Valley Forge. He would have been captured probably in Philadelphia itself. Civil War, we became a prison. And then we served all the way up through the end of the Korean War as a supply depot until we were officially decommissioned in the 1970s. And in 1986, we were officially labeled as a national monument and a museum. So it is one of the longest continually operational military installations in the United States, because it did run from 1771 all the way up to the 1970s. And I'm very proud of that.
It wasn't the fort where the Star Spangled Banner was supposedly.
South
No, that was
South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, he was actually on a ship looking out at
Sumter. Right. Okay.
Right.
American history is not one of my strong suits. Yeah.
Really? Man, I thought you knew everything.
My history stops in 17th century Italy.
What I always like is that the Star Spangled Banner is a song with the almost unsingable tune that is a British drinking song and lyrics about a battle we lost.
There we go.
You got to be proud of everything, wins and losses.
Now, you was saying, because I've read the history there at Fort Mifflin that you guys have up for the history. But during the Revolution War, the British on November 15th bombarded the fort with over 200 cannon from ships on the river. The fort was defended with about 400 men. Do you know how many those defenders were killed in the fort?
We don't know for certain. We do know that about 25 of them did make it to Fort Mercer across the river in New Jersey. We do know that there was about 100 bodies buried at the fort. Beyond that, we're not entirely sure if people were killed or they might have just run off into, the world outside, I guess, because that was a very common thing. If you were getting, kind of cornered in a spot, just to kind of take off, which is, it's fine. But I mean, we like to say that of the 400 men, there probably were about 200 or so that actually did die there.
Is there an official cemetery at Fort Mifflin?
There is not anymore. There was for a very long time, but when they did the renovation to put in the parking lot, they actually reinterred everybody at Arlington Cemetery.
So they were buried out where the parking lot.
Correct. Yeah, right behind the hospital building where the parking lot is, and then there is a current Fort Mifflin Army base that actually has a driveway that goes up through what used to be the cemetery space.
Well, wait a minute. There's a current Fort Mifflin. There's another installation now?
There is. There is a military installation, is an Army Reserve base, and it's actually right next door. We share a driveway, we share a parking lot, and they are actually huge supporters of the original Fort Mifflin. So their current commandant is actually our honorary commandant and we have a ceremony for him every time they kind of change colors and everything.
Cool. Now, are there 4th of July events at Fort Mifflin?
There is. Tomorrow we are actually holding the Freedom Blast, which is kind of an open house, come and see all the fun stuff that we do. We'll be having tours, we'll be having cannon demonstrations, military installation demonstrations. They do fun and games for the kids. They like to do colonial games. We have a woman who specializes in Civil War medicine who will have her set up available. Not on the 4th itself, because Philadelphia has so many 4th of July events, but it's actually going to be tomorrow, July 2nd.
Yeah.
10 to 4.
They don't allow reenactments at the fort, do they?
Oh, absolutely. We do at least one a month, if not more. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We don't have, how do I put this? We do have reenactments. We do every war from Revolutionary all the way up to World War II. Nothing Vietnam related is permitted at the fort, but everything else they do in some form. The siege itself, the actual 2-day reenactment of the siege, takes place in November every year, so that we honor the men that gave their lives here at the fort. And then we also hold a Pirate Day, if you want to pretend that you're a seafarer. We do World War I, World War II. We do a Christmas reenactment, so you can see kind of what Christmas looked like in a military camp. And then we do Civil War reenactments twice a year. One, we do a prison reenactment, so you can see what a Civil War prison was like, and one an actual, storming of the gates. Now, obviously, none of these battles were fought at the fort, so there is a little bit of creative license taken with them, but they are a lot of fun, and the kids learn a lot, so it's good to have.
Now, you said in the history part that across the river from Fort Mifflin was Fort Mercer.
Yes.
Is it still there?
There's not much of Fort Mercer left. There's a few wall pieces, and then there's one outbuilding that is still standing. It's a private residence, though, so you can't access it. It is a state park in that you can, kind of tour the grounds, but the fort itself was actually taken down. It wasn't, it was never attacked.
So when they left Fort Mifflin and went across the river to Fort Mercer, did the British then take over Fort Mifflin?
They did. They actually, so when the men left Fort Mifflin, they actually set fire to a large majority of the buildings. But then, like I said, they left their flag up. And then the British did land. They did take over. They claimed the land, per se. But they didn't spend a lot of time there. They pretty much moved right into the port of Philadelphia.
So it was abandoned briefly by both.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily abandoned per se. I mean, it was, you know, kind of, it was scorched earth.
A strategic
Withdrawal.
withdrawal.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. I like that one.
Awesome. Now you have a pirate day?
We do have Pirate Day. That's one of my
That's
favorites.
barbarous.
I love pirates.
Well, we have our Pirate Day in August. We actually have expanded it now beyond pirates to calling it our Seafarers Weekend, because we did open it up to tall ships and some other cool nautical things. So it's a lot of fun. We have a house band that does all sea shanties, and they dress up like pirates. They're awesome. They actually came to my birthday. I was so excited.
Now Fort Mifflin is on, obviously, ships can get through there, correct?
Yeah, so Fort Mifflin is what is officially known as Mud Island. It's a man-made, well, it's a natural island that was actually expanded by man. So it's technically considered a man-made island. Now, since the fort was built, it actually, we being man, has filled in the back channel to make the Philadelphia airport. So it's not actually an island today. But we do have water on 3 sides, and it does sit right on the channel of the Delaware River. So it's the main river into the city of Philadelphia.
So how big an area is the fort?
The fort itself, the actual walls, it's just under 2.5 acres. The actual fort property is more about 10. We do own a lot of ground, and there is a World War I, World War II gun barrack or a gun battery that was actually hidden in the woods outside of the fort walls, which not a lot of people know about. Everyone always skips that part. Like, go for a hike. They're there. They're cool.
Well, they during World War II, they had anti-aircraft emplacements put in there too.
Yes, there were some within the walls. They sat where the cannons used to be, and then they said there was some gun batteries that were actually hidden in the woods for the same purpose.
Holy smokes. I didn't think that they would get that far in with battery placements. Were they really worried about invasion?
I don't know for sure.
Wild.
I can't say one way or the other.
I would say that they were probably taking all kinds of precautions because they did have a lot of shipbuilding and they stored munitions there too, right?
Yeah, it was actually a munitions depot and a storage depot for about 50 years. So, I mean, there was quite a lot of stuff still at the fort that needed protecting. Beyond that, there actually were German U-boats that were coming up the Delaware River into the Delaware Bay, things like that. So, I mean, there are reasons for concern, I guess.
That's cool. Well, not cool, but yeah. So, a little bit about the fort, because I remember bits and pieces of it from television shows, and I know that there was a lot of underground bunkers. Can you kind of explain the layout just a little bit?
Sure. So Mifflin is a standard star fort. That means that it has 5 points. It's got a brick wall that goes all the way around the fort. There are 4 sally ports, which are the main entrances. There's the North Sally Port, which is actually our large 2-story gates, and we actually still have the original gates, which is a very rare thing. We have the West Sally Port, which is the main port you would come in from our parking lot. That's where we kind of send visitors through today. And then the South Sally Port is no longer accessible. It goes out to the moat. So, but all our other Sally Ports are there. At each Sally Port, there are 2 guard sheds actually built into the walls themselves. Then once you're in the fort, you have a giant parade ground, which is so cool because when you first walk through those walls and that ground spreads out in front of you, it's a breathtaking sight. Because it's so easy to imagine any time period of soldier marching through there. You know, you can kind of hear the musket fire echoing off the walls. It's such a cool sight. But we do have 7 outbuildings that are still standing. There is what was the quartermaster's shop, now our gift shop. We have an officer's barracks for enlisted officers, which is a 2-story building that is open. That's where we keep a lot of our museum pieces. We have a officers' quarters, which is where officers that were married with children would actually get a one-room apartment. That's the building that actually was recently in a fire last year. We have the Commandant's House, which is a two-story building dead center of the parade ground where the Commandant lived from the late 1800s on. We have our original blacksmith shop. We have the original hospital building and some other things. Now, the cool things that you're talking about, the underground pieces, there are what are called casemates. These are actually built into the walls, buried under the earth, and then kind of set into the ground. And we have 12 of them. So there's casemates 1 through 5 are actually built into the wall. And they were used as housing. They were used as our Civil War prison. They are the ones that if you've ever seen Fort Mifflin on TV, you've probably seen casemates 1 through 5 because those are our most famous ghosts back there. We do have a bake oven that is a casemate. We have a powder magazine. We actually have a torpedo chute as well. Solitary confinement, which was only recently uncovered. And then we have a couple of casemates that are actually outside the walls that were used for storage. Because you don't want to store your powder where your people are sleeping. They found out that that's a bad thing, especially if you're lighting everything by stove.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So, yeah, torpedo chutes?
We do, yeah. So I know a lot of people don't think of torpedoes as a Civil War thing, but we actually had a torpedo. We have a torpedo magazine where they actually, I mean, I'm not entirely sure if they used it during the Revolutionary War. I know that they did try and use it during the Civil War, but they would wind up these little clockwork bombs, drop them into the chute, and hope that they made it out to the river before they exploded. And they're kind of cool looking. But nowadays, all you can do is look down and kind of see like the square hole where they would have dropped it. You can't drop anything.
How often did they use that?
I don't know that they ever actually used it in battle. I don't have any record of them actually torpedoing anyone. But it's nice to have.
Oh yeah, surprise attack. Yeah.
Especially because the torpedo magazine is actually inside the walls, so and buried, like I said, in one of these underground casemates. So if there's anybody in there dropping bombs, you have no idea they're coming.
Yep. Sure wouldn't. Just tough luck.
Oh, I'm just trying to figure out how they would project it out.
Well, they had a little clockwork fin on the back, so they would wind up the clockwork fin, drop it in, and then the tide of the river is supposed to pull them out.
Cool.
Yep. Amazing technology.
This is Civil War?
That's Civil War.
Amazing.
Yeah, those were Civil War, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome technology.
So you kind of answered part of it, but one of the things, the building you said that was the officers' building in the commandant's office in the center of the fort.
The commandant.
Yeah, when we was there in 2009, they were working on the inside of that, reconstructing or working on something, redoing it. Did they get it finished?
They did not. So the commandant's house was actually intact up until the late 1980s. And then we had a group of overnight guests who let their fire go untended, and unfortunately, it gutted the entire building. So the decision was made in the 2000s to rebuild the roof. So the roof has been restored, the cupola has been restored, but on the inside, we've kind of just agreed to let it go, and then put in a, looks like a back deck, it looks like some decking, just so you can kind of walk out into the space to see kind of around some of the columns and things. But the decision was made to leave it as is, at least for now.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the good stuff. Or do you want to wait till after break? You want to do that till after break, and then we'll talk about some of the things that goes on in the fort.
Well, the question, I still have a couple of questions
go
about
ahead.
The fort, and that is, you recently uncovered some isolation cells?
Yeah, so casemate 11 is our solitary confinement cell. It was actually buried just after World War One. They actually sealed off the entrance. Why they did that, we're not entirely sure. And the official story on how we uncovered it is that our handyman at the time was cutting the grass and actually fell into a sinkhole, which led to the stairs, which then led to us uncovering the whole thing. If you watched the Ghost Hunters episode with Fort Mifflin, you can see the Ghost Hunters go actually down into the hole when it was still, go down this ladder into this creepy dark dungeon. Now it's actually legitimate staircase into thing. But it is, when you go down in there, the door is just about 2 feet wide. You go in, and there is one cell, and that's it. And it was used to house 2 men, William Howe and Bernard Devlin, not at the same time, 2 different times. William Howe is the only person to be hung for treason at the fort. He's actually the only person we know of by name to actually have been executed at the fort. He was imprisoned for desertion. He then shot a federal marshal who was trying to take him back into custody. And then for that, he was then brought back to the fort and hung for treason. Since then, it's actually come out that he was probably pretty innocent. And I can tell you that whole story if you want to hear the whole thing. But so we like to tell everybody that he is actually innocent. But he spent a good portion of his time incarceration down there. And then Bernard Devlin, we are not entirely sure what he was sent down there for. We know that he was a Civil War prisoner. He was an Irishman. He liked to play a lot of practical jokes, and we think that one of his practical jokes just went a little too far, and his commanding officer or his whoever was in charge of him at the time just basically sent him down there for a short period of time to kind of cool him off a little bit.
So,
You think about what you did there, Zolder.
Yes. Go sit in a dungeon.
So how much more things do you think is kind of like still hidden in the fort that people hasn't found yet? Are they looking for other things now?
So the city of Philadelphia has actually told us we cannot do any excavation of the fort at this time. So they've kind of put an end to any further discovery, I guess, unless anybody falls into another sinkhole. There's a couple of spots that people are, I guess they're theorizing that there is something else there. There's a few spots where, based on other star-shaped forts and other star-shaped layouts, that there should be another casemate somewhere, a guard shack somewhere. Now we know that a lot of the Civil War buildings, the Revolutionary War buildings obviously were burnt down, but there should be some bulwark in the walls that we kind of haven't uncovered yet, and that's kind of what people have been poking around, looking for. We wanted to get a ground-penetrating radar in there. Unfortunately, that did not happen when we thought it was going to happen, so that's hopefully on the list for the future.
Yes.
Barbara, you got more?
Not about the fort directly. We can take a break and come back and talk about the ghosts.
Yep. That's what I was going to do. So we can do that. Let me get set up here for it. And I guess seeing as how Jeff is still working off time, I guess, something like that. So
I'm just trying to stay connected at this point. Skype is not being pleasant tonight.
Well, why don't you take and go ahead and take us out, and then I'll bring us back. How's that sound?
Don't do a huge pause in a sentence like that. I thought I got dropped again. You're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's guest, Rebecca Brumble. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View in Fort Mifflin after the break.
Are you psychic? Do you often have dreams that come true? Do you have an interest in hypnosis or astrology? If you'd like to learn more about classes, events, and books on metaphysics, then go to our website, www.theartofmediumship. This is Elaine Kosmaskas, director of the New England School of Metaphysics and author of The Art of Mediumship.
It's always time for the dead to shine in Hollywood. The legendary Dearly Departed Tours has stepped up their ghostly game by offering the Hollywood Ghosts and Legends Walking Tour. Dearly Departed has long been an orb of hope in the paranormal world, having been featured on television's Haunted History and Haunted Collector. Their terrible tales have been made infamous in Marla Brooks' The Ghosts of Hollywood books. The new Ghosts and Legends Tour is a 10-block, 70-minute dusk-time stroll down the boulevard of broken dreams. You'll be guided through the golden age of Hollywood and see where the unearthly Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney, and the calamitous Black Dahlia are still said to linger. You'll see Hollywood's Gothic hotels, legendary theaters, and restaurants, never forgetting their permanent occupants. No stranger to investigations, Dearly Departed Tours has first-hand knowledge of some of these hauntings. For details of the Hollywood Ghosts and Legends Walking Tour, find Dearly Departed Tours on Facebook, dearlydepartedtours.com, or call 1-855-600-DEAD.
Hi, I am John Zaffis, and you are listening to Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Mike from Mr. G's Ice Cream Store in Gettysburg, the most haunted ice cream store in town. Stop in and see us next time you're around. We feature 16 flavors of homemade ice cream made right here in the store. Look forward to seeing you.
So, Tim, around here at Para-X, we're considered oldies because we've been here so long, right?
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with oldies. In fact, you know what? I really love oldies.
Well, yeah, me too. I mean, it kind of takes me back to a time when my Cauldron had training wheels and the Black Cat Lounge was called the Black Kitten Lounge. Sometimes I miss the good old days.
Sis, there's no need to miss them at all, because all you have to do is turn on and listen to Rock with the Shock.
Rock with the Who?
No, little sis. No, not the Who. The Shock.
Yes! I found it at last! Marla's sacred cauldron. This is the legendary artifact that has been whispered about in hushed tones for hundreds of years, and now it's mine! All mine!
Who dares defile the sanctity of my castle walls? Step away from the cauldron, you impertinent, muddy-metaled maltworm.
Never! I've spent half my lifetime trying to discover your age-old secret of stirring the cauldron.
Oh, for Merlin's sake, that's no deep, dark secret. Just tune into the Para-X Radio Network Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern for more cauldron stirring than you can shake a wand at.
Oh, well, in that case, I guess I don't need to take up any more of your time, so I guess I'll be going.
Not just yet. We've got a little unfinished business to take care of.
That's Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Para-X Radio Network.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Great show, and rooms filling up nicely. And those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one of you also. Tonight, we have with us Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
And Barbara Duncan. And our guest, I want to welcome her back, Rebecca Brumble.
Thank you for having me.
And we are talking about Fort Mifflin. There's lots of reasons we're talking about Fort Mifflin. What? Huh? There's a lot of reasons we're talking about Fort Mifflin. I knew I'd get it right in a minute. And it's a very, I guess, haunted location, you might say. You went there as just a tour and fell in love with the place. Did you go as just touring the fort as historical, or was it like a paranormal event that you was doing?
So the first time I went, it was a paranormal event. So I had seen it on one of the shows or something, and then I saw that they were doing an event, so I went. But like the event went from, it was like 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something like that, and at 6 a.m. when they cleared everybody out, I went and slept in my car, and I came back at 10 o'clock to help them with the cleanup day they were having the next day. So I guess it kind of one bled into the other. But no, the initial thing that brought me there was definitely the ghosts.
So did you see anything or hear anything on that?
That first event, I really didn't. And it was simply because there was so many people there. It was one of those ideal events that you mentioned before. Just they had a lot of people. Now the fort is pretty big, and you can lose 50 to 100 people fairly easily in all those buildings. I don't know how many people they had, but it was a lot. And I feel like all I heard all night was everybody else. So that first time, not so much. After I started coming back and the spirits started getting to know me, I have never been disappointed there. Even when I just go because it's a Tuesday and I want to go, walk around, never been disappointed.
So before anything else, why don't you let everyone know about the different paranormal activities that takes place in the fort? Some of the things where people has reported seeing, hearing, and the different things like that. And to let people know, if you have headphones, you might want to get them, because after a while, we're going to be playing a couple EVPs.
Yeah, there's some really good ones too. So, some of our more famous spirits that you've probably heard of, the biggest one that people always hear about is our Screaming Lady. And there's a lot of stories that get passed around about who she actually is. But the only thing we know for sure is that it happens any time of the day, for any reason. We're not entirely sure. We don't know why or where or how, but we know for two things. Number one, it always comes from behind the officers' quarters, which is that 2-story apartment building that I told you about. It always comes from behind there. Now, there's two things back there. There's a hill that leads to the moat, and there is a patio where the officers' wives would hang out, and they would do laundry, they would, cook, things like that. So a lot of reasons for a woman to be behind that building. It is a blood-curdling shriek. I've heard it several times in my life, and I can tell you the first time I heard it, I came sprinting, and I am not a runner, but I came sprinting from across the fort because I thought somebody fell in the moat. That's what it sounded like. It sounded like somebody was dying. It's terrifying. The really bizarre thing about this is if you're in the officers' barracks, which is where the enlisted men slept, you cannot hear the scream. You can hear it anywhere else in the fort. You can hear it on the road driving up to the fort, but you cannot hear it in that one particular building.
Now, does this happen at different times, or a particular certain time of the day or night?
We've been trying to track it to see if there's a pattern to it, but it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be kind of whenever. I've had it happen 2 o'clock in the morning. I've had it happen at 6 o'clock when I was leading a ghost tour. I had it happen at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the fort was full of people for a reenactment. That was fun, trying to explain that. So it is weird and random, and we've had people actually call the cops when the fort was closed because they heard the scream and they thought someone was being murdered in the woods around the fort. So we actually have cop, police reports of cops coming to check on this scream.
Huh. What is the wildlife situation there?
We do have a lot of geese. a lot of rabbits. We have a few fort cats.
Foxes?
We do have a couple of foxes, but this is not a fox's cry. We've looked into that. We do have 2 red foxes that made their burrow on top of the hill, but this is definitely like, think of your worst horror movie, scream chiller movie. That's what it sounds like.
I've heard fox screams that literally sound like a woman being slowly dismembered. And they really do sound like human females when they're screaming. Just saying.
Jeff.
Oh no, I absolutely agree with you, and this is something that we have looked into. And I don't discount that might be a possibility, but I've been behind the building when the scream happened, and there was nothing there. So, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I'm not discounting that it might be that. It might just be that, we've been mislabeling it for all these years. I hope not, because, it's a cool story, but...
could be both, too.
Yeah. It could be a mix of things. Sometimes people always look for another explanation. I've never been one. If you have a better explanation,
I want to know why it isn't heard in one specific building. Because,
that is the first thing. I have no idea. But I told you the first time I heard it, I went sprinting. I was clear across the fort in the bake shop. And the bake shop is underground. And a good, like I said, clear across the fort. Like, you could not possibly get any further away and still be inside the fort walls from one spot to the other. I heard it clear as a bell. I have the recording of it. And, of course, me saying bad words as I went sprinting because, like I said, I thought somebody had hurt themselves. But there were people sitting in the officers' quarters right next door. These buildings literally touch. The 2 patios of the 2 buildings touch. So these buildings are, maybe 15 feet away. They didn't hear it. They were sitting there talking. They were not asleep. They were not, on their phones. They were just sitting there having a conversation, and they didn't hear it.
Wow. Just that one.
They had a ghost. They had it ghost proofed.
That's what. It's like a little bubble around that house. I don't know why.
Well, speaking of that, before you tell anything else about the fort, when was the first report ever that someone had seen a ghost or heard some sort of a paranormal activity?
So the first one that I'm aware of is actually in the 70s, before the fort was actually decommissioned. Some of the guys that were in charge of clearing out the munitions that were stored there were actually saying that they were seeing and hearing many people. Now, in the 60s, a lot of people from the local town would kind of come through the fort and use it as a hiking path and thing. But these guys were claiming, and again, we have to take their word for it, that they looked for people and they didn't see anyone. So that's the first report that I know of. I'm sure some other people will have a different answer for you.
Wow.
Well, I'm curious about that one area that you can't hear screams in it. Does that area have activity in it, or is it, like Jeff said, kind of ghost-proofed?
It's not. So there actually is activity specific to that building. So that building, like I said, was these big, long barrack rooms, and they would have, this is where the bunks were for a lot of the enlisted men. They're simple. Their rooms are about 30 feet long by 10 foot wide, maybe 15 foot wide. They had 2 rows of bunks. They were 4 stack bunks, which means that 2 guys would share a top bunk, 2 guys would share the bottom bunk, and they would spend their off time in these bunks with the, like a mess table going down the middle for cards and hanging out and doing all that kind of stuff. And in this building, we actually have reports of people hearing boot steps. So like people getting ready, getting dressed. If you're around when shift change happens, which is right around 6 a.m., and then again around 5 p.m., which is also when mess call would happen, you can hear a lot of boot steps, almost like, people jumping out of beds and throwing on whatever and going to get wherever they need to get to. A lot of that. And then we also have what we call our unknown tour guide who shows up there. Now, the unknown tour guide kind of roams around the fort, but one of the coolest stories that I ever heard was there was a group of students. I would say they were 8th, 9th grade. They were about 13, 14 years old. And they stood in front of one of the sets of bunks to take a photo. And it was 4 girls, and whoever their chaperone was. The chaperone took the photo. Now, this was before digital cameras, so these photos actually had to go to, a print shop and actually be printed. And so these photos were printed out, and was it take a week or whatever it took. You get your pictures back, and one of the girls in the photo actually wanted to know who the soldier was standing behind them, because they didn't remember anybody taking the picture with them. They thought it was just them standing in front of these bunk beds. They brought the photo to the fort. We confirmed that wasn't any of our tour guides or anybody who worked at the fort at the time. And so the girl took the photo into school, and unfortunately for our story, the girl went to Catholic school, and so the nuns confiscated it and threw it away. But that girl's name is Katie Brown, and she actually portrays one of our blacksmiths. So if you ever come to a fort event and Katie is working in the blacksmith shop, ask her about the photo, and she will tell you all about it.
Wow. So why did they get rid of it? They was afraid people might think the place was haunted?
Or it was just a probability of like passing notes kind of a thing.
Well, yeah, it actually, her teacher actually got rid of it. So she took it to school, and she went to Catholic school, and the nun disposed of it.
Sure,
let's get everybody out.
Yeah, they'll get rid of it. That way people won't think that anything's haunted. Yeah, ghosts don't exist.
So that's an on-tour guide. So we do have other spirits too. I can keep going if you want.
No, keep going.
All right. So another really cool spirit that we have is actually in the blacksmith shop, like I was just mentioning, where Katie works. So our blacksmith shop is from 1864. So post-Revolutionary War, almost post-Civil War, depending on where you draw your lines. And at the time, the guy that worked in there, his name was Jacob Schmidt. He was our blacksmith. So he, when the heat of Philadelphia summers came along, would open all the doors, open all the windows, get his forge going, and start cranking out everything that he needed for the fort. They did, everything from horseshoes to brackets for the windows. He did it all. The commandant at the time was an exceptionally cranky person who did not like the noise from the blacksmith, and then his wife dislike the smell. So the commandant made an order that the blacksmith shop, the doors and windows had to be closed at all times to keep the smell and the noise from drifting and bothering them. So this went on while Jacob was alive. He would open the doors, the commandant would order them closed. He would open the doors, the commandant would order them closed. And this was a consistent thing that happened. Now, Jacob passed away of natural-ish causes, as in, we're not entirely sure what he died of, but we know he wasn't murdered. He was buried at the fort, and he's one of those sets of bones that was actually reinterred at Arlington. But so now, if you go to the blacksmith shop and you close the doors, and then you come back in a little bit of time, the doors will actually be open again. And we actually had our caretaker, Wayne, actually did a test one night. He closed the door, he deadbolted it shut, and it had iron hinges keeping this door closed with a an actual padlock. He came back in the morning, the iron hinges were actually bent, the padlock was off, and the door was in the yard.
He said, I want this open.
Pretty much. So he was determined that door was going to be open. Now, other things, he likes to move his tools around. So if you move his tools, he will put them back on the shelf. He likes to make a lot of anvil noises, I think just to piss off the commandant. But he likes to bang on his anvil. And actually, people have reported seeing him recently. Then, when I say recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, we've gotten several reports of people saying that they've actually seen him. A tall-ish, dark-haired man with a leather apron on, with a light shirt and dark pants. And they all have been consistent stories in that they're seeing somebody walking back and forth from the anvil to the tools, but these people are not associated with each other. And this is actually the first time I've said that out loud. So I'm thinking they're not getting the story from each other. But it has been cool that the last, like I said, 2 or 3 years, we've been getting these claims that people are actually starting to see him, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a mixture of probably a residual and active haunt.
We absolutely do. I mean, the residuals, we have soldiers that march around the walls. We have people that march through the parade ground. We have people drumming cadences. We have cannon fire. You know, all those residual type things that you would expect at a battlefield, we've got all those. But what we do have also is personalities. And these spirits, when we talk about the intelligent or the active hauntings, they all have personalities that you can track back. So when you go and you listen to the stories people are telling you, oh, you might not know it, but that is William Howe. Or, oh, you might not know it, but that is the soldier from casemate number 1. And we can actually put them together so that these stories are actually connecting to each other based on the spirit's personalities, which is really cool to me.
How much interaction is there between the active hauntings and the staff at Fort Mifflin?
Well, Wayne actually was living there before he retired. He was living there 24/7, and he actually had a pact with the spirits saying, this is my room. You leave this room alone, and you can do whatever you want out there. So he actually never had any interaction with them. Now, the staff that's currently there, they're all relatively new, and they've all had so many hauntings between them. It's funny because they always tell me, because I'm kind of like the resident ghost hunter collector story person. And they'll all tell me, oh, guess what? I was in here and I saw the lamplighter. Or I was here and I saw the gopher running down the big shop. And it's fun because like these people came into the fort for the historical side of things, and they're starting to embrace and enjoy the historical aspect of it, the paranormal aspect of it, which is great because I think those two definitely go hand in hand. But the staff in general, the more time you spend in the fort, the more likely they're going to start following you around. And certain ones definitely take a shine to certain people. I've noticed that, for example, Joe is our newest, he's our program and development manager. He recently started, and he gets a lot of interaction from the spirit in the bake shop. Whereas I tend to get a lot more interaction from the guys down in casemate 11, in solitary confinement. Scott, a guy on my team, he gets a lot of interaction from the commandant in the commandant's house. So, I mean, I guess it depends who you are, but they definitely take a shine to you. And once they know that you are coming back again, they make a point to connect with you, which is really cool.
Wow.
Have they provided much information as to who they are and how they died, or what it was that their job was there?
Some of them actually have. We've gotten several names, in so much that we know that the spirit that kind of, I'll say haunts, but he lives in the bake shop and he kind of travels down the hallway of casemate 1 through 5. His name is Michael. He told us that. And we were able to track back that Michael worked in that area. He was a gopher. His job was basically to take stuff from the bake shop and deliver it to the prisoners. So that was his job. We were able to find him in the records. He also told us that he walks funny, which the Michael that we found in the records actually had a limp and he wasn't a little person per se, but he was on the shorter stature. Like he never got above like 5 foot tall or something like that. So that was very interesting to connect that. We've gotten names of the bunker children that run around the yard who passed away from yellow fever. We've gotten their names. There's other ones that have told us how they passed away. You know, for example, the one that told us that the bomb blew up in the supply depot. That one. We have Bernard Devlin, who told us that, you know, he was there. He's the one that likes to, you know, pick up girls' skirts and squeeze them on the butt.
Okay.
Yeah. But then there's some that have never told us, and we just kind of have assigned them a name just to give some humanity to them. Because sometimes it's weird to be like, oh yeah, that spirit in casemate number 4. You know, we call him the judge because he seems to be very judgmental and very cranky. So, you know, sometimes you have to do that assigning yourself, at least until you get more information. But they are very, very talkative too. If you get them in the right mood, they
That sounds like a great validation for ghost investigations, is to be able to say, well, I didn't know this person, but I'm able to verify that they are who they say they are.